What's up, everybody, and welcome back to TarHeelIllustrated.com, or, of course, if you are watching on our fast-growing YouTube channel, that's Tar Heel Illustrated. I'm THI staff writer Jacob Turner, and joining me, as he always does, for the UNC Football Show, our very own publisher, Andrew Jones. And, AJ, this is, in some ways, an episode that's a long way in the making, because we did one, a little bit over a week ago, and we were going to put out on Wednesday, and I forgot what happened, but I think all the news in the world broke out the next day.
Well,
so we couldn't end up running it.
we were going to focus on the transfer portal.
Yep.
And we had everything except one guy who was not expected to go into the portal, and he did. That's Storm Duck. Everyone else we expected to go into the portal, including Tony Grimes. And then Storm went in there, and we couldn't run the podcast.
And Phil Longo news broke 30 minutes after we got off the podcast.
Yeah, and we did a separate Longo podcast. So that we were going to do separately anyway, because we wanted to focus on the portal, which Longo stuff did not affect the portal one bit. Nobody left because Longo left. All that stuff. We knew the kid's leaving 2 days before Longo announced that he was leaving.
Yeah.
And when I talked to him, he said he wasn't taking any of the Carolina kids with him or anything like that, just the offensive line coach, Jack Bicknell. So now, this week, I guess we're going to talk about the guys who replaced Bicknell and Longo, because that is the fresh news of the day. And it's timely. We were going to do a football show today, but I guess we're zeroing in our topic on these two for the most part.
Yeah, I was disappointed last week too, because I thought it was one of our better podcasts. You had a ton of insight on the transfers and like Drake Maye situation.
If you look, we're very organic, as people know.
Yeah,
if you want to hit on a little bit of that at the end of this, we can, or we can do something separate on it. But
we'll talk about it.
Still news.
Yeah, we'll talk about it towards the end, a couple little things like that, and especially kind of what we knew with the Drake Maye situation as well, because I think you were on top of that the whole time. And
totally, yeah.
I think later that night, because I remember editing the podcast, the Drake Maye news broke as well. So the tweet went out from Drake Maye. So it was just it was bad timing.
There was a lot of hysteria, and it's amazing. There's a lot of outskirt sites and blogs and otherwise that just throw stuff out there. And unfortunately, with media changing so much the last 15 years, that the line's been blurred between media that is credentialed and there all the time, what would have been like newspaper type media back in the day, not too long ago. And then the fringe sites that aren't credentialed, and they just cherry pick and everything, and they just guess, and people think, oh, that's happening. And the people who cover Carolina on a regular basis, do it as professionals, knew that Drake wasn't going anywhere. It's the fringe that were fearful, and because a lot of them are fans, they operate under the mindset of fear a lot of times. They were, so there was this hysteria that Drake was going to leave as well, and that was never the case. Yeah. So
Twitter doesn't help with that either.
Yeah, and people think, oh, Carolina ponied up and all that kind of stuff. They didn't have to. They didn't have to pony up. Drake understands where he is. He's got some NIL deals. I guess we're doing it now, by the way, Jacob.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll talk about it.
Yeah, and he knows he's going to sign a $40 million contract in 18 months. So he's a Tar Heel. He's a Carolina kid. He ain't going anywhere. Wasn't going to go anywhere. We knew that. We were going to try to pull people from the ledge, which is what we try to do sometimes, and didn't have the opportunity because we didn't run that podcast. But all the concerns people had over Drake was totally unwarranted at all. And had our podcast gotten out that night, we would have told people then, but we didn't need to run it.
Yeah, it was kind of the same way. We'll hit on the transfer portal real quick before we talk about what we're kind of meant to talk about with the new hires at offensive coordinator and offensive line coach. But we talked about it in the last podcast that didn't run about the transfer situation with the guys that have entered the transfer portal. I think we talked about in the podcast, but a lot of people kind of freaking out about that kind of unnecessarily too, because when you kind of look at who, I know there's a couple guys, Tony Grimes, Storm Duck, that maybe some people didn't expect, more seasoned veterans, guys that are really integral to that defense that left. But overall, most of the people that left either weren't going to play or were kind of told that based on what we'd heard behind the scenes and decided to go somewhere else. And you can't really blame them. So give us a little bit of insight on, real quickly, on the transfers that have left so far, not to hit on everyone individually, but there's a few where, there's some different storylines to them and different reasons they may have left too. So,
well, one of the things that is absolute about the way Mac runs a program is there's total honesty to the kids.
Yeah.
So they met with all the kids Sunday, Monday, and I guess maybe even into Tuesday after the championship game, and told them each where they stood with respect to playing time next year, what the expectations would be, to how things would turn out. And they were told either they weren't going to play much, if at all, or they were going to have to battle for a starting position. So that's what moved a lot of the guys out, and they decided to go seek something elsewhere. In one case, there was a requested position change that I'm not going to go into who it was, where the player didn't want to do that, and he was not too thrilled with things, so he's going to go into the portal and try to play that position somewhere else. It'll be interesting to see where he ends up. As far as Storm Duck goes, he's the one name I didn't hear. I heard all the other names. Mm-hmm. The one name I didn't hear in advance that I was caught by a little bit of surprise was Storm, because my understanding from excellent sourcing is that he was going to get NFL information and make a decision based on that, whether he would go to the league now while he's healthy or come back to North Carolina. And people might chuckle, say, Storm in the NFL. Well, before, when he was healthy, Matt kept calling him an NFL player. And he finally was healthy for a couple of games this year and then got banged up again. So I don't know where he is as far as his health goes right now. But maybe there were some conversations after that where Storm decided, maybe a fresh start's good. Yeah. I've been hurt here a lot. And I don't know. I'm just speculating on this. And not so much speculating, but having learned so much about why kids leave over the years, this would fall in line with something like that. So he'll get some takers. He'll go somewhere. I thought it was interesting. A lot of Oregon people went crazy saying, you got to come to Oregon. I know. Yeah, that was funny. Playing for the Ducks would be interesting. As far as Tony Grimes goes, I think the best way to describe this is that it's probably good for both parties. I think that maybe Tony needed a change, and maybe he hadn't developed as much as he had hoped and expected in 3 years. I'm not going to lay blame on either side there. I don't think that there's any value in doing that. But I think maybe a fresh start for him and Carolina moving on is probably good for both sides. As far as everybody else goes, a lot of them weren't really to play, didn't really play much anyway. They haven't really lost a lot of depth because they were kids that were either struggling to get onto the field or were maybe never going to get on the field. Yeah. The one that left that came back, that they brought back, was Day Hollins, and I think they did that once Duck entered the portal. Mm-hmm. And Day, he's a guy that every August is like fifth in the depth chart. And remember, in 19 and 20, he had so many injuries at corner that he was pressed into action and played pretty well. And then last year in 21, he had that terrible injury to start the season, missed the year, and then just kind of fell behind. But he's an insurance policy. He's a really good insurance policy to have in the program. So he's back, but everyone else, I don't anticipate any of them withdrawing from the portal and returning. And a few of them have already found schools. Yeah, no doubt about it. It'd be interesting to see where everybody does end up, especially with a few of those guys that have transferred. But again, like we talked about, majority of them weren't really playing anyway, probably weren't going to play in the first place. Next year, we're going to have a good shot at playing anyway. So you can't blame for most of the list on leaving. And again, you always expected to lose some players that play a lot too especially in today's world with the transfer portal as well. So I don't think anybody, like you said, nobody's really a shock. And I don't think anybody that they lost is, any issue to panic or anything like that. I think it's just kind of next man up. Well, they lost some good players, but they feel really good. Like, for example, Cam Kelly. And Cam Kelly was intermittently really good. Mm-hmm. He was either really good or he was struggling, but they love Will Hardy. Yeah, and that's the Will Hardy spot. And they absolutely love Will Hardy, and they're ready to pencil him in. And that's understandable. And I think they'll be in really good shape. So does Cam Kelly want to stay for his last year of college and try to fight off Will Hardy for a starting job, or go somewhere else and get penciled in there? So I think it was a good decision for Cam. Yeah. And I think this program's shown, especially Mac's shown in the past, that especially with guys that have maybe would be coming back as like a fifth-year senior, especially maybe if they're not at that kind of super elite level, then why not put somebody younger in that's going to be around the program longer that maybe has a little bit more of an upside? To me, it's a smart decision in a lot of ways. Chris Collins has a year of eligibility left, and he's kind of fits in that role as well. Mm-hmm. So what do you have? You have Malachi Hamrick next year. I wouldn't be surprised. They've already looked at some kids in the portal that would be jacks that could come in and play that jack position. So if they could get anybody remotely close to Noah Taylor, they'll be in really good shape next year with that guy and Hamrick playing the jack, and you could move Rucker back to his natural more natural rush in position.
Yeah.
So that will make the defense better. And that's what I expect them to do in the portal is find someone that can play the jack.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, that's enough portal talk. That covers essentially in a short synopsis what we covered in the last podcast. Obviously, a lot of the stuff's been out for a week anyway, so that's kind of all we'll hit on in terms of that. But we'll obviously move on to the bigger news and essentially why we're here. If you're reading the title and clicked on this one, here to talk about the offensive coordinator and offensive line coach hires that were announced earlier this week and one earlier today as well. So at that offensive line coach position, Randy Clements has joined the North Carolina staff, came from North Texas, before that coached for a long time at Baylor, Houston, FSU, Ole Miss, and like I said, most recently North Texas. That's just to name a few of kind of the bigger programs in recent years that he's coached at. So go look at his resume. It's pretty impressive. He's done some really nice things. It's some pretty big time programs, and I think has proved that he's one of the better O-line coaches in the country. So for me, I think that's a good hire. And then moving on to the offensive coordinator side, Chip Lindsey, which was announced earlier on Thursday, came from UCF. Looking at UCF this year, just to throw a stat at you, ranked number 11 in total offense this season at 480.6 yards per game. To compare that, Carolina currently ranked 15th with 473.6 yards per game. So definitely a guy that's done a really nice job at UCF in particular this season. Before that, just to name a few other schools, was a head coach at Troy for 3 seasons before he ended up going to UCF, was also the offensive coordinator at Southern Miss, Arizona State, and Auburn. So a guy that has a pretty impressive resume as well. I tweeted it yesterday. I'm not going to act like I'm an expert on either two of these guys because I'm not. I'd be lying to you if I said that. But I think if you break their kind of resume down, look at some of the quotes from the press release from North Carolina, from Mac, on kind of the reasons of hiring and everything like that. I think the resumes in a lot of ways speak for themselves. And it even looks like they got the Drake Maye stamp of approval, because Drake Maye tweeted a little bit earlier that he was excited and had already talked to Chip Lindsey and was excited to get to work with him as well. So AJ, give me and I know you're not an expert on either of these two guys either, let's not lie, but give me your thoughts on the hires and maybe the timeline as well, and maybe some of the stuff that went on behind the scenes, because I mean, in reality, it didn't really take Mac Brown too long to make these hires. And I think that's something we probably expected wouldn't take long either.
No, I think Mac, with his reservoir of connections in the sport, was able to talk to a lot of different people who had a variety of experiences with Clements and Lindsey, either working with them, coaching against them, having to scout them, that kind of thing. So he's able to get a lot of different takes on who was available, who he was looking at, who people suggested to him, and this is what he came up with. I'll start with Clements. He coached under Seth Luttrell the last couple of years at North Texas. Seth was Carolina's offensive coordinator during those explosive years under Fedora, the really explosive years under Fedora. He went from that job to North Texas. He was let go, but he had a pretty good run there. Mm-hmm. It's, if a guy has 2 mediocre years, he gets fired nowadays. So Seth was terminated a couple of weeks ago. But there's a lot of connections there with Clements. And what you said as well about the Baylor run. If you remember the bowl game in 2015 down in Orlando, and how can any Carolina fans don't want to remember that? Yeah, they gave up like 9,000 yards rushing to Baylor. Well, the offensive line coach was Randy Clements. Mm-hmm. They were pushing Carolina around. They produced NFL guys in 10 years at Baylor. I think they had a 9-year span or something like that where they were in the top 13. 9 straight years they were in the top 13 in total offense. 3 years they were number 1 in total offense. You don't do that without having a good offensive line. And you don't do that at the Power 5 level without having an offensive line that can pass block some and run block some. Carolina was very close. The best year it had under Longo was 2020, and they were the number 5 offense in the country. They produced a couple of 1,000-yard rushers, and that was Sam's best season at Carolina. And they did that in a limited schedule. They didn't rack up numbers against FCS and lower tier FBS teams that year. It was a straight up Power 5 schedule until they had that Western Carolina game late, and they didn't play a lot of those guys that much in that game. So their damage was done against Power 5 straight up. So, and they played a pretty tough schedule that year too. So I think that should give people an understanding that Randy Clements, the offenses he's been involved with, have been able to run, they've been able to pass, they've been able to pass block. As far as Lindsey goes, boy, he's got an impressive track record. I didn't know much about him. I remember he was the head coach at Troy, because we had a year where we were doing some stuff with the App State site, and Troy was in the league. But I remember his name, and he replaced Neil Brown, who went to West Virginia, and they had some really prolific offenses there. In 2017, though, he was at Auburn. I did write this down, so I'm going to actually read some numbers here, which I normally don't do. But 2017, Auburn became the 8th SEC team ever to have to run for 3,000 yards and pass for 3,000 yards. I remember Jarrett Stidham was a quarterback. He's in the NFL now. He threw for 3,000, and running back Kerryon Johnson was the SEC Offensive Player of the Year that year. Now, Lindsey also had a Conference Player of the Year at Southern Miss, quarterback who's also in the NFL right now. So he knows what he's doing offensively. I've already seen the pushback on the boards and stuff on Twitter.
Didn't take long, did it?
He stunk as a head coach at Troy. Mac didn't hire him to be head coach.
Yeah.
Mac hired him to run the offense. So don't worry about what he was as a head coach. That doesn't mean squat. Most guys aren't really good head coaches. Most head coaches get fired, right?
A big percentage,
but fewer offensive coordinators get fired. It's harder to be a head coach, right? You got more responsibility. You take more of the blame. So he was hired to be the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach. He's got a track record there. And Clements hired to be the offensive line coach. It's all people should focus on. Those are their duties. Don't worry about anything else they did. So because of that, it looks to me like these are probably pretty good hires. And as I was talking with somebody from UNC last night about another issue, but I did, probe a little bit about this, and Carolina had done a really good job going dark on this. They said, you know what, just tell your readers, because this is absolute. Just trust what Mac does. The Hall of Famer. He's been around. He's got tons of connections. He's going to make a good hire. So, and I'm not pushing the party line here, Jacob, but how can anybody argue against that?
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard.
He's not going to make a bad hire. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out for whatever reason. But I think people should be okay with this. It looks like it's something that could work, because they're not going to tear up the offense and start new. They're going to slide into what they've been doing and tweak it some. And I do think with these hires, there is an emphasis on running the ball better in the red zone, running the ball better in tight situations, and maybe a little bit better in the pass protection realm. So it could be an upgrade on the offensive line coach, and we'll see about coordinator. But if they're a little bit more multiple, then it might be best for a quarterback as well, because not a lot of air raid in the NFL. There's some variances of it as part of packages, but maybe it's better to attract quarterbacks moving forward that are going to get coached by somebody that might better prepare them for the NFL.
Yeah.
That's what people say. A lot of people don't think Longo is great preparing them for college, but maybe it wasn't great for preparing them for the NFL. That's not my take. That's just what I've been hearing for the last 10 days, 9 days since Phil left.
Yeah. And let me say this too, because speaking on Phil, you talked about it. I guess you talked about it in the podcast we did about Phil Longo going to Wisconsin. And you said something along the lines of, like, the people who were trying to run Phil Longo out of town for the last 4 years, kind of be careful what you wish for. And I say that because I think people are complaining about this hire, because I see people on Twitter like, oh, well, this guy ranked like one spot better than Carolina did in red zone offense last year. And I'm like, guys, you got to understand that, like, Phil Longo, when you look at his resume at North Carolina, like, he was a really good offensive coordinator statistically. So if you're looking to go find somebody that's better than Phil Longo, that pool is really shallow. There's not a lot of guys out there like that. So I don't know what people expect. I don't know if they're going to go hire Urban Meyer or something like that. Like, it's never going to happen. No. So I didn't really, I think people got to understand that too, because people just like to compare stats, but like, Phil Longo was a really good offensive coordinator. It was always going to be hard to find somebody that statistically at least is like better than him in every category. It's just unrealistic.
Well, an example of what I was talking about early on about, the fringe element out there that they don't have to answer for anything. There's no accountability. There were a lot of people throwing names out there. But if you notice, the people who actually cover the program closely and rely on being properly sourced weren't really throwing names out there, because we weren't getting names. For me, I did something on Tuesday about or Wednesday about Lonnie Galloway, simply because I'm not going to put a name into the bloodstream that I've not been told by a source. I don't care what other people have reported. And I put Galloway in. I'd still a little piece and saying, look, he's wanted to become a head coach for a while and got to probably become a coordinator before becoming a head coach. He was a co-coordinator at Louisville. He was passing game coordinator at West Virginia, and he's now been promoted to passing game coordinator now at Carolina. So he did get a promotion, even though some people said he wasn't going to get a promotion. But I put his name out there simply because A, he's running the offense for the bowl game. B, he is on that track, and I know that head coaching is something that could be in his future, and that would be the natural step. C, he knows the lay of the land. He knows the personnel. He knows the offense. They wouldn't have to tear things up to change with him. And I just said, look, I just think it's a name people should pay attention to just in case, because I didn't have any other names, and I'm not going to throw those names out there. Well, he did get a promotion, and I didn't say he was going to get the job, and some people thought I did. Some people on our site, I think, got excited, or upset, saying that they think that there was an ulterior motive, that I was putting something out there that was well sourced. And I could tell you, I had no sources on this at all. No sources on the search. Carolina went dark. They went dark for everybody, and nobody knew. And I think that this hire caught everybody off guard, because if I would have done one of those lists, I wouldn't have had Chip Lindsey on the list. And I don't think anybody else did either. So kudos to Carolina for going dark, doing a good job, keeping the media paws off of this and getting the guy that Mac wanted and doing it in peace and silence. That's usually the best way to do it. And some of the names that people are throwing out there, I can tell you right now, weren't contacted, never going to happen.
Yeah.
So
no,
people should be, you're right about what you said is 100% right. Be careful what you wish for by getting rid of a guy who had 4 straight top 15 offenses. I think they brought somebody in who's got a really good track record. Whether or not it works at North Carolina, who knows? But I do kind of like the combination that they got here. We'll have to wait and see. We'll get to speak to them probably after the bowl game. They're not going to coach in the bowl game. And then we'll get to see the offense next year, and then we can all make our determinations. But I wouldn't make these sweeping determinations now without knowing, because both of them have pretty good track records.
Yeah, no doubt. I will throw in, you mentioned Lonnie Galloway being promoted to the passing game coordinator. On the flip side, John Lilly, tight ends coach, has been promoted as well to the running game coordinator as well. So those are 2 other kind of promotions within that have gone on. It'll be interesting to see how that dynamic works with Chip Lindsey coming in. Real quickly, AJ, before we wrap this one up, which we're going to do it in a second, you mentioned the bowl game. We talked about that in our last podcast. It never came out too. Let's just hit on that real quick. Obviously playing Oregon in the Holiday Bowl, December 28th, 8 p.m. Eastern kickoff in San Diego, Petco Park. I know that's a place you're excited to go check out. So, AJ, give us – we're not going to dive into the matchup here, because we'll do that in a later podcast and when we, on the week before the game. But can you just give us a little bit of an insight on what the next couple of weeks look like for North Carolina when they're flying out? Because I think they're flying out a little bit earlier than they usually do as well, because it's a kind of a cross-country trip and whatnot.
Yeah, they had their first practice last Saturday, and they're going to have 8 practices in Chapel Hill, and then they're going to have 3 in San Diego. They fly out the 23rd. And Mac wanted to go out a day early because it's a cross-country flight, get acclimated. Now, it's a 5 p.m. start. The game is out west. It's 8 p.m. here. So that won't be different. They'll just kind of have to – I wouldn't be surprised if they stay somewhat on an East Coast time frame just to prepare for like an 8 p.m. type game. But they're going to practice 11 times total. They've already had, as we speak right now, they've had 3. So – the game's in less than 2 weeks. It's kind of coming here pretty fast. And part of that, I guess, is because they played in the ACC championship games. They shortened the period in between games by a week right there. I think it's a good opportunity for them. They're playing a brand program. They're playing a program that people watch. They're one of the few West Coast programs that's kind of sexy to people in the eastern half of the Mississippi. And I think it's going to be a neat uniform game, by the way. No doubt. It'll be interesting to see what Oregon runs out of the tunnel wearing. And I think it's a wonderful opportunity for Carolina to get a 10th win. With the 3-game losing streak and a lot of the negativity from the fan base about the program, if you get a 10th win and you do it over Oregon and you beat them on the West Coast, That's pretty good. That'd be a really good thing to fire off into the off season with. And I think that would really dramatically change the narrative around the program right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's going to happen. I think that they're probably a pretty decided underdog, and we'll hit onto that when we get closer to the game. But I do like the opportunity, and I do think they're taking this seriously. They weren't ready for the bowl game last year. I think the team and the program will be more ready for this game and this opportunity. It's going to be on Fox. It's going to be on network, national TV. I think the last time they played on Fox was the opener in 2018 at Cal. That was a network national game on Fox, and didn't turn out that well, but who knows? Maybe this one will. So it's a good opportunity for the program to do a lot of narrative shifting and to get some pretty good exposure as well. And you beat a team like Oregon, and you get a 10th win, Mac will sell that to the cows come home.
Especially on the West Coast.
As he should. Yeah. And as he should.
Yeah, no doubt about it. So it would be great for the program. Not only that, but going into the offseason, I think it'd be huge. I really do. And I think it would leave a lot better taste in Carolina fans' mouths, because it's obviously been a tough few weeks to end this season for the Tar Heels. But I think it's been a pretty positive one in a lot of ways over the last week or so with some of these hires. So, AJ, we'll go ahead and wrap this one up right here. Chip Lindsey, Randy Clements in at North Carolina, and obviously Phil Longo and Jack Bicknell out. If you want to go listen to that podcast we put out about a week ago about the Phil Longo situation, kind of hear a little bit more about what went into it, why he decided to go to Wisconsin and leave North Carolina, go listen to that. You can find that on our YouTube channel as well. And real quickly, AJ, before we wrap this one up too, I do want to give a shout out to our sponsor on this one. They've sponsored every UNC football show that we've done this season, and hopefully can continue to do so. That's myperfectfranchise.net. So guys, if you're looking to diversify, looking to leave the corporate rat race, gain control of your own income and schedule, what about having unlimited PTO, ability to create income and wealth on your own? Well, guys, look no further than myperfectfranchise.net. So as you guys know, who've been watching the show consistently, Andy Ludicky is a longtime Rivals member, diehard college football fan, and franchise veteran, having owned multiple franchises and businesses. And what he does with his new endeavor here at myperfectfranchise.net is uses his expertise to help others find their American dream through a thorough and keyword-free consultation process. So if you've ever thought about opening a franchise, and there's so many different franchises you can open, if you want to learn more about it, I'm not only going to link the website below, but I'm going to link links to our 2 podcasts that AJ did with Andy about a month or so ago, where he kind of goes in depth on more about the company, what it is, how you can, get out, go about reaching out to them and actually go through this process. Really interesting stuff. So if it's something you're interested in, definitely give those podcasts a listen below, and definitely go on his website and reach out to him. Put your life and career in your own hands. And guys, what do you really have to lose? 100% free. He's a massive Mac Brown fan too. So if you do end up talking to him, make sure you let him know that Tar Heel Illustrated sent you. Again, myperfectfranchise.net. Link to that and the podcast are in our description below. But AJ, we'll wrap it up. I've been Jacob Turner. He's been Andrew Jones for an episode of the UNC Football Show. If you're excited about the hires and you're excited about the bowl game, go ahead and give this video a like below. Let's see how many likes we can get on this one. Make sure you share and subscribe as well, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks.